After months of build-up and a franchise-historic 10-week airing, Star Trek Picard Season 1 has come to a close. While many content creators across the globe are working on their full season breakdowns and reviews, including yours truly, I wanted to take a moment to really deep dive into the most important aspect of the show's first season, the arc of Jean Luc Picard.
I'm a boss, I'm a bitch and a boss, I'm a shine like glass, I'm a bitch. I'm a boss, I'm a bitch and a boss, I'm a shine like glass, I'm a bitch.
To understand Picard's total story arc, we really only need to look at 2 scenes from the entire series. And interestingly enough, the sequences bookend the show as the first and almost last scenes we see as an audience. I don't know what this Shaban guy is trying to do. What is he, some kind of writer or something? Okay, so the scenes I'm talking about are the Data and Picard discussions in Episode 1 and the Data and Picard discussions at the end of Episode 10. And I already spent some time gushing about how awesome this opening sequence is between the 2 characters in a previous video, but I intentionally left my feelings on the final sequence out of my finale reviews so I could better deep dive into it later on. Besides, that finale review was already super long because I said the word bizarre like 150 times. Bizarre, 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 bizarre. Picard, at the start of the series, is a very different person than we last saw him on screen. He's a bit off. But that's kind of the point here. Patrick Stewart was very vocal that Picard was going to be a bit of a stranger to longtime Trek fans, and he wasn't kidding. Episode 1, Picard is extremely lost. He was forced out of Starfleet, failed to save the Romulans, lost most of his friends, and now hides away in his vineyard filled to the brim with regret, remorse, sadness, and probably not enough wine. He even states later on that he was waiting around to die at the vineyard.
I've been waiting to die.
While his personality is fully explored throughout the season, we learn everything we need to know about where he's at right now in just under 3 minutes during the opening sequence. So let's break down the visuals of this dream. First, we have Data, a friend that was taken away from Picard and someone who he loved very much. Then we have the 10 forward lounge of the Enterprise D, the ship Picard commanded the longest, which was also taken from him years earlier after being blown out of the sky by Klingons.
Yes!
Then we have the Game of Cards, something that Picard apparently started playing with his crew a bit more based off of the TNG finale, but self-admittedly wished he had done sooner. Next up we have the tea, which has milk in it, something that Picard usually doesn't drink. And finally we have the clothing. Data is in his uniform, while Picard is rocking his best lumberjack cosplay. So what does all of this tell us about where the character of Picard is just from the visuals? Picard is full of regret. He's no longer strongly identifying with Starfleet and appears to not really be himself. The inclusion of the Enterprise D speaks to his emotional connection to that ship and the fact that he lost it. The sequence taking place in 10 Forward reinforces his feelings of regret about not spending more personal time with the people he cared about. The fact that Data, one of the only crew members from the TNG show to have died, is the only other person in this dream with him showcases his regret and sadness surrounding that loss. Data, wearing his uniform, is a way to showcase to the viewer that Picard is memorializing him in a certain way, holding on to the last image he had of him and not wanting it to go away or to move on from his pain. Also, Picard not wearing his uniform is a subtle way to showcase to the audience that he no longer considers himself to be the same captain that he was before, and that he no longer associates himself with Starfleet in the same way. So now that we've got the visual story element for the sequence out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the dialogue, specifically the discussion towards the end of the card game. Data goes all in, with Picard saying that this is all that he has left. He calls but still loses the game because Data has a bizarrely stacked deck of queens. The whole bit here is a metaphor for how clinging on to one's memories and not wanting the game to end is a losing battle, and to keep playing it would mean giving everything up he has left, which in this instance is his own life. His own subconscious is trying to warn him of the consequences related to the path he's going down. Picard wakes violently from this dream after imagining what the destruction of Mars must have felt and looked like. This takes us to an important moment, waking up in the comfort of his vineyard estate. In fact, throughout the entire season, Picard is seen sitting in the comfort of his private office quite often, even going so far as to create a holographic program of it on board La Sirena. He uses this place now as a way to avoid moving on and wallowing in his own guilt. This is critical to the ending sequence we can discuss now. So let's break down the visuals of the final scene between Data and Picard. After succumbing to his brain illness, Picard wakes up in a familiar place with a twist. The private den of his chateau is completely blacked out, almost as if it's been burned in a fire. It's also falling apart in some places, exposing itself to the vastness of space. We again see Data in his uniform with Picard in his civilian clothing. And towards the end of the sequence, Picard exits through a door with a giant white light. So what does all that mean? Well, the blacked out room signifies the death of his warm blanket, but in a good way. Picard has burned down the comforting walls of the vineyard to once again jaunt into the cosmos. This is also signified by the room flying through space and the door Picard walking through at the end, seemingly allowing him to leave behind the room and walk out into the unknown. The white light, which is normally associated with a person dying, is actually being used to signify the death of Picard's weighted guilt about Data's own sacrifice and his other regrets. He's ready to move on from them and put down the feelings he was clinging onto. In fact, this sequence's dialogue has Data helping Picard reach that moment. Together they acknowledge what it means to be human, and Picard finally has the closure he's been looking for. In a lot of ways, the ending sequence is essentially a second half of the first conversation in episode 1. It solidifies Picard's arc during the entire show, which is him dealing with grief, moving on from loss, and finding a new purpose in life, which is essentially without Starfleet. It's actually kind of fun to watch both of these scenes back to back because they really do feel connected in a lot of ways. Anyways, guys and gals, that's my very brief interpretation of Picard's story arc. I'm curious to hear what you folks think about this. Get your comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.